Hello, YouTube. It's me again with another video. As indicated in the title of this video is addressed to America as a whole from me, Brandon. Uh, the title, if you haven't seen it, is You Don't Owe Me Anything. Hopefully, this video will be a little more structured than my last video because I want to cover a couple of points just broadly, more generally. I can get into the points more specifically if that's what you would like, but I figure in the interest of length and time that you have to watch these videos, I try to make them as painless as possible. So I'm going to try my best to cover the main points that I hear from people all the time that perpetuate this just complete lie that somehow, because of my ethnicity, that if you don't share my ethnicity, you somehow owe me something. That is not the case. There is tons of evidence to back up what I say, and I'm going to go over some of that today. Let's just get the first one out of the way. Racism. Okay. Racism has been chosen as the primary weapon of the progressive wing in this country, especially politically and socially, for one reason and one reason only. Because once you call somebody a racist, that's about the worst thing you can call somebody in America, and that's by design. Once you call somebody a racist, they spend the majority of their time trying to prove to you they're not racist. Most people do. And those people mean well. I think one of the reasons Donald Trump was so successful when he got elected in 2016 is he was the first Republican that once a Democrat called him a racist, he didn't spend the rest of his campaign apologizing for something he didn't do. His response to "you're a racist" is you can go F yourself and keep talking about the issues. He responded to something that Republicans have been wanting their party to do for decades: stand up to the Democrats, have a backbone. Don't let them frame who you are and what we stand for. So when I discuss racism here with you today, I want to make it clear my views are mine alone. They don't reflect any organization that I'm a part of or anybody else but me. Um, One of the things about being a conservative, especially one from an ethnic background, is that you get challenged all the time. So a lot of the points that you try to make to people is going to make them uncomfortable, and they're going to immediately come back with a canned answer from what they heard from Don Lemon or Chris Cuomo or somebody like that. So let's just tackle racism first, the big one. First of all, the way racism is thrown out, it almost has lost its meaning. We get called racist like people say good morning. It is ridiculous. Racism is a horrible thing. So, like other horrible things in our society, it should be something you have to prove before you just go around calling somebody a racist. The elephant in the room is Donald Trump. Donald Trump has been called a racist for about 4 years now. He was never a racist before that. There are rap albums written about Donald Trump because what he's known for is his brash personality and the fact that he has a lot of money. Donald Trump's got cameos and, uh, Home Alone 2, rap songs. Mac Miller got a song called Donald Trump. UGK, one of my favorite rap groups, made a song about Donald Trump because he's not a racist. He was never a racist. He was called a racist because it was politically opportunistic for people to call him a racist. As a matter of fact, liberals love polls. They love polls when it meets their narrative. Well, I like polls too. I like factual polls. I don't like polls about people's opinions and stuff like that. But this particular poll is interesting when it comes to race. Because did you know that Rasmussen, one of the more reputable uh, polling companies, they actually took a poll of U.S. respondents, Black, white, Hispanic, and Asian, and most Americans did not see Americans of European descent as the most racist ethnic group. A lot of you would be surprised to find out that it was Black people who were seen as the most racist ethnic group. And that includes 31% of African respondents. So that means that of the people who were asked, of the Black respondents, 31% of Black folks see Black folks, their own community, as the most racist group in America. Now, if you spend any amount of time around Black folks, if you spend any amount of time watching television, I got one thing that I want you to do for me. Find the lie in that statement. There is one group in this country, one ethnic group anyway, especially those who have a political platform or a sports platform that are openly racist, and that's black folks. I don't know why we get away with it. I do know why we get away with it. It is a byproduct of guilt. And that circles back around to the purpose of this video. You don't owe me anything. If you're watching this and you're not black, if you're watching this and you are black, you don't owe me a damn thing. Nobody alive today was ever a slave. Nobody alive today ever owned a slave. You don't owe me anything. Don't let anybody tell you that you owe them anything. Especially if it's under the premise that, well, America's racist. Because that's not true. America's not a racist country. Country is made up of 330 million people. Are there racist people in America? Absolutely. And when you point them out to me, the same as anything else, if you make an accusation about somebody to me, you need to show me. You can't just say that guy over there raped somebody. Everybody should not be believed. There it is. You shouldn't believe every woman. You should take every woman seriously and seriously investigate her claims. But if we believed everybody, that's not the way our justice system works, and rightfully so. People are presumed innocent until proven guilty. It should work the same way with race. Organizations today are way too quick to completely condemn somebody on an accusation of race. No proof, no evidence, no history of racism. Just, hey, somebody said this guy did something that may be racist. Well, you got to go. And that to me is a level of cowardice. Will you get some blowback if you do the right thing and say, hey, you know what? If you're going to make an accusation about somebody, you need to prove that. Yeah, you're going to get some blowback. But eventually, people will get the picture. The only thing that stops bullies is you got to push back. And if you allow somebody to bully you with the claim of racism, they will keep doing it. Along the terms of racism, a similar topic is slavery. Slavery in this country has been used as a shield behind which people can lob just endless accusations and say anything they want. And if you oppose them, you must agree with slavery. I'm going to say something to you that shouldn't be controversial, but I assume that it is, just from the mood that I get when I bring this up. Slavery was once as common as owning a car in this world. As human beings, we advance along the moral spectrum. So I have a question to ask anybody who is willing to answer it. If slavery was evil, which I believe today, if you own a slave, that is an evil thing. But that is because we have evolved as beings. We have evolved as creatures of intellect, of morality. Is every single person who ever owned a slave evil in your eyes? I want you to think about that before you answer it. Is every single person who ever owned a slave, participated in the slave trade, or didn't actively fight slavery evil in your eyes? Because if that's the case, nearly every person that we venerate throughout history is evil to you. I don't think slavery was right. Of course not. But I was born in 1983, and I have the luxury of looking back and judging those people. I am a Christian, okay? Slavery's in the Bible. That's just a fact. I'm not condoning slavery. I'm not trying to use God to condone slavery or justify slavery. Slavery today is unjustifiable. Just like a lot of things they did back then is unjustifiable. Muhammad marrying an 8-year-old girl is unjustifiable. But the fact remains that he did it, and back then it wasn't that crazy. I have an issue with the idea of framing slavery in the terms that it only existed in the United States and the Black experience in this world started with slavery. That's not true. More has happened to us and for us in the history of civilization, I'm talking about Black folks, than us being slaves. Now it's convenient. It makes it really, really easy for you to frame an argument and use that cowardly tactic to stop anybody from challenging you on it. Your ancestors were slaves. Okay, my ancestors were slaves. Okay, if you go back far enough, almost everybody's ancestors were slaves, unless you're Prince Harry or something like that. Unless you came from a royal lineage, at some point in time in your family's history, there were slaves, probably slave owners too. Now, it's interesting to me that the interest in slavery stops at about 1861 in the United States. Arabs traded, captured and traded European slaves for centuries before the transatlantic slave trade. Most of the slaves that ended up in the United States here, and at the height of the Civil War, at the height of slavery, about mid 1861, when the Civil War started, there were about 4 million slaves in the United States. About 4 million. About 8% of the US population actually owned slaves. Now, once again, I'm not justifying it. I'm just telling you the facts. That should matter to you. What also should matter to you is that it didn't happen like it happened in Roots. It wasn't just 2 or 3 people, Africans, walking along the road and somebody threw a net over them and drug them onto a boat. It didn't happen that way. The majority of African slaves who ended up here on this continent were sold to the European slave traders by other Africans. They were taken. Some were already slaves. They were taken in war. They were taken in raiding of villages, taken and sold to European slave traders for profit by our own brothers and sisters, our own distant relatives. Now, once again, that does not justify slavery, but it should change your opinion of it. It should change your opinion in the level of culpability that white folks have in slavery. It's not all their fault. If you are in this country today, it's likely you were sold by somebody who looks just like you. I think it was in 2003 or 2004. The president of Benin actually went on a tour in the United States. Went on a tour to college campuses and churches and stuff like that. And the purpose of that tour was to apologize for his country's role in the Atlantic slave trade. Now, I understand that's not widely known, but I wonder what that would do for race relations in this country. One of the hardest things to do for us is to hold a mirror up. We can hold a mirror up when we think it's hurting somebody who disagrees with us. We can do that. It's easy for us to do that. But we have a problem pointing the blame where it should be. I don't give any credence to the argument of slavery if all you're talking about is slavery in the US. If you're telling me that the reason you are not successful today is because of slavery, you're lying. That's a flat out lie. You have no idea what you're talking about. As a matter of fact, people who are closer in ancestry to slavery, African immigrants, come here and perform far better than black folks who've been here for generations. I'll talk about that a little later. Let's move on to voter suppression. That's a big one, right? The election just passed. The main arguments that I've heard about voter suppression are ridiculous on their face, but the fact that I hear those arguments so much, I want to address them. Getting an ID. If you think having an ID is voter suppression, I don't know what I can do for you. I understand you're not asking me to do anything for you, but that is a dumb argument. You need an ID for everything. You need an ID to get on a plane. You need an ID to buy a pack of cigarettes. You need an ID to go into an R-rated movie. You need an ID to use your credit card. You need an ID to apply for welfare or any kind of benefits. You need an ID for access to any government building. I tell you what, if the politicians who are pushing voter suppression as a justification to change or eradicate voting laws or any verification of voting at all, if voter suppression and saying getting an ID is too difficult is your justification, then why aren't they in favor of getting rid of an ID requirement to enter a government building? You try to walk into the U.S. Capitol building without your ID. Try to arrange a tour of the White House without your ID. Try to buy a gun without your ID. Try to get on a plane without your ID. It's a ridiculous argument, and the people who make it are ridiculous for making it. I don't understand how The same people who argue that gun sales are out of control. We got to get rid of the gun show loophole, which is less than 1% of guns are bought at commit crimes are bought at gun shows anyway. Let's get rid of the gun show loophole because there's too much of a risk in people buying guns who shouldn't have them. Well, we just voted and elected a man into the White House who's going to have the nuclear codes. I think that's at least just as important as somebody buying a gun. That's just me. It's the most condescending argument I've ever heard, that you think I'm too dumb to get an ID. And there's a guy on YouTube. I'm not advocating that you watch his videos or anything. It's a good video. If you want to watch it, you should. Amy Horowitz. He actually, it's a couple of years old. He goes around, I think it's New York, and he actually speaks to black folks. And he presents to them the argument that white liberals make about voter suppression. And first, he first speaks to white folks. A lot of white folks say the most condescending things, and they don't mean it. They've been taught this by other condescending liberal white people, that black folks are too dumb. They're incapable of getting an ID. First, he goes around. That's exactly the nonsense that gets spit back at him. Well, a lot of them don't have education. They don't know where to get an ID, and it's racist. So then Mr. Horowitz goes and speaks to black folks. Black folks, to their credit, find that argument utterly ridiculous. Every person he asks, like, do you have an ID? Absolutely. Do you know where to get an ID if you didn't have one? Yeah, I know where to get an ID. Do you think you could get an ID? Absolutely. That's something that you need. I think there's a quote from one of the people. Everybody has an ID. You need one. I agree. It's not voter suppression for me to ask you to have an ID so I know who you are. That's not voter suppression. That's common sense. We shouldn't be at a point in this country where the soft bigotry of low expectations are so prevalent that we think that having an ID or having a requirement that an ID be presented to someone at a polling place is racist. It's ridiculous. Now, what I hear a lot is income inequality. Both when we're talking about the differences between genders and the differences between races is income inequality. Now, I personally have a problem with statistics that I see about income inequality, because framing it in the context of black versus white is a mistake. Your income is far less dictated by your race than it is your circumstances. If you grew up with two families, if your parents are married when they have you, you grow up with both parents. I don't mean two families. I mean, if you grow up with both parents, that is a far bigger indicator of your income than your race. How do I know that? Well, because West Indian immigrants, African immigrants, come here and they perform far better than native-born African Americans that have been here for generations. They have higher employment participation, higher levels of education, more of that demographic. I'm talking about Black West Indian immigrants in America. More of that demographic are raising their kids in two-parent households. So unless you're telling me that the systemic racism, or the people who are controlling the system in this country, are going around and determining which black folks are West Indian immigrants and which black folks have been here for generations, and somehow separating them out and making sure this group does better, you can't make the argument that income inequality is because of racism. You can't make that argument to me. I make more money than my parents did. Oh, and by the way, I've heard the counter to the argument to the presentation of information that West Indian immigrants do better than native-born blacks. The counter to that argument has been, well, of course, immigrants are the most motivated, or the cream of the crop, so to speak. Well, that shouldn't matter. If America's racist, black is black to them, right? Why in the world would it matter if you're an immigrant or you were born here? Black is black to a racist, and a racist don't care where you came from. If you are black, if you are white, they don't like you. Preference based on race, drawing assumptions based on somebody's race alone is racism. You don't get to escape it because you're black. Yes, black folks can be racist. I've heard that argument too. Black folks can't be racist because racism is prejudice plus power. That is bull. That is a nonsense argument. It makes no sense whatsoever. Preference, whether in the positive or negative based on race, is racism, period. If you think you're better than somebody because you're black, if you think you're worse than somebody because if you think somebody's worse than somebody because they're black, you're a racist. I got no problem calling you out. I'm just not prepared to call the whole country racist because there are certain people in the country that are racist. That does not translate for me. The last one I want to talk about before I wrap this video up is a big one, especially for me. Obviously, I have a professional and personal stake in this topic: police brutality. Does police brutality happen? Let me just give you what you want on the front end of it. Yes, police brutality does exist. It is also extremely rare. Police brutality is extremely rare. There is something in the neighborhood of 330 million police contacts a year. I read a study about police brutality, and I don't even think they meant to make this point. But the percentage of black people who even claim police brutality compared to the actual number of police contacts per year is like something 0.08%. It's hard to measure. It's so low, it's hard to measure, is what the article said. And a 2016 Yale study said this about police brutality, and I quote, "We find no racial differences in either the raw data or when contextual factors are taken into account." Now, you can't get much clearer than that. Are police perfect? Absolutely not. But once again, we've talked about making perfect the enemy of good. We have a very, very good law enforcement apparatus here in this country. Very good. I keep hearing justice. We want justice for George Floyd. What happened to George Floyd? George Floyd was abhorrent. Those people are in jail awaiting trial. Well, they went to jail and they're awaiting trial. That's justice. Justice is not your preferred thing to happen to somebody. That's not what justice is. Justice is we apply a standard which is meant to bring about accountability for what somebody did. It's not just I don't like what happened. I want you to do the preferred thing that we want to do to this person. That's not what happens. I want him fired. I want him divorced. I want his house. That's not what happens. And that's to protect you, not everybody else, because one day you may be accused of something and you're going to want the same due process that you wanted to deny everybody else. And I don't want to go off on a tangent about George Floyd, but I do want to bring up one point. What evidence do we have to suggest that what happened to George Floyd was racially motivated? If the first thing that comes out of your mouth is that the officer was white and George Floyd was black, you're a racist. You have nothing to suggest that guy. To this day, I haven't heard anything about his history of him abusing black people. As a matter of fact, I heard a story, something to the effect that they knew each other. If your answer to the question of what evidence do we have to suggest that what happened to George Floyd was racially motivated, if the first thing out of your mouth is that officer was white, you're racist. There's no way around that. If the only thing you know about a person, and that's what determines what you think about something is their race, that's racist. That's what we're trying to get away from. Do not fall into the trap where if two people are involved in a situation and those two people are of opposite races and those races are white and black, it must be racially motivated. That is why we are at the point we are at right now. Because that's been beat into our head over and over and over, and we bought it. We are not willing to give somebody the same benefit of the doubt we would want ourselves. And until we're willing to do that, things won't get better. Don't get me wrong. I don't think racial relations in this country are nearly as bad as people make them out to be. But could things get better? Sure. Are things pretty good now? Sure. But perhaps if we framed it that way, perhaps if we framed it in the light of, well, we understand that there has been tremendous progress. We just want to keep moving forward because we still see some issues. I wouldn't have a problem with that. What I have a problem with and where you lose me is America's a racist country. There's systematic racism in the police force. There's systematic racism in the justice system, and it needs to change. To quote one of the members of Black Lives Matter, give us what we want or we'll burn this system to the ground. That's where you lose me, and that's where you lose a lot of other people too. Once again, thank you if you are watching this. I appreciate your participation in this, whether it's commenting, liking, sharing. or disliking, whatever. Please like, share, subscribe, and comment on this video. We'll see you next time.